Hello and welcome to our video on the evolution of landscape architecture, a historical perspective. Landscape architecture is a field that has undergone significant changes over time, and in this video, we will take a look at the key historical periods and events that have shaped the field as we know it today. First, let's start with the origins of landscape architecture. The earliest examples of landscape architecture can be traced back to ancient civilizations such as Egypt, Greece, and Rome. They placed great importance on the design of outdoor spaces, and used a combination of horticulture, engineering, and architecture to create gardens, parks, and other outdoor spaces. In ancient Egypt, landscape architecture was mainly used for religious and ceremonial purposes. The Egyptians built grand gardens and parks, often with large water features, such as pools and fountains. These spaces were designed to mimic the lush gardens of the afterlife, and were often used for religious ceremonies and rituals. In ancient Greece, landscape architecture was mainly used for residential and recreational purposes. The Greeks built gardens and parks that were often centered around a villa or palace. These spaces were designed to be both beautiful and functional, with features such as terraces, paths, and water features. In ancient Rome, landscape architecture was mainly used for residential and recreational purposes, as well as for public spaces. The Romans built grand gardens and parks, often with large water features, such as pools and fountains. They also built many public spaces, such as the famous Roman Forum, which was a large open space surrounded by temples and other public buildings. As we move forward in time, we come to the Middle Ages, a period in which the design of outdoor spaces was largely influenced by the Catholic Church. Monasteries and other religious institutions were often surrounded by beautiful gardens, which served both practical and spiritual purposes. Monastic gardens were designed as places of contemplation and meditation, and were often divided into 4 quadrants, symbolizing the 4 elements of earth, air, fire, and water. They also often featured geometric patterns, with straight lines and symmetrical shapes, as well as herbs and medicinal plants, which were used for medicinal purposes. Castle gardens were also popular during the Middle Ages. They were often designed for the pleasure of the aristocracy and featured ornate designs with fountains, statues, and other decorative elements. The Renaissance period marked a turning point in the history of landscape architecture. This was a time of great artistic and cultural achievements, and the design of outdoor spaces began to reflect this. Gardens and parks became more ornate and formal, with geometric shapes and symmetrical designs becoming popular. These gardens were often designed to reflect the harmony and balance of the universe, with features such as axial symmetry, geometric shapes, and mathematical ratios being used to create a sense of order and proportion. The use of water features, such as fountains and pools, also became popular during the Renaissance. These features were used to create a sense of movement and change, and were often designed to reflect the beauty and power of nature. Renaissance gardens were also designed to be a place for leisure and recreation, with features such as terraces, paths, and pergolas being used to create different areas for different activities. As we move into the 18th century, we come to the Age of Enlightenment. This was a time of great change, and the design of outdoor spaces reflected this new way of thinking. One of the main movements that emerged during the Age of Enlightenment was the picturesque movement. This movement emphasized the natural beauty of landscapes and sought to create an idealized version of nature. Landscape architects of this period designed outdoor spaces that were meant to look natural and unplanned, with features such as winding paths, irregularly shaped ponds, and irregularly spaced trees. The picturesque movement also emphasized the use of the landscape to create a sense of emotion and mood, often using different elements such as water, rocks, and vegetation to evoke different feelings. During this time, the idea of the garden as a place for leisure and recreation also continued to evolve, with new features such as the gazebo, the belvedere, and the ornamental pond being introduced to create different areas for different activities. The 19th century saw the rise of the city park movement. This was a time when cities were growing rapidly, and the need for public parks became increasingly important. Landscape architects such as Frederick Law Olmsted and Calvert Vaux designed some of the most iconic parks of this period, such as Central Park in New York City. During this period, landscape architects began to focus on creating parks that were accessible to all members of society, regardless of social class. They sought to create outdoor spaces that were both beautiful and functional, with features such as walking paths and sports fields being incorporated into the design. The city park movement also saw the introduction of the green lung concept, which emphasized the importance of parks as a source of fresh air and a place to escape the noise and pollution of the city. As we move into the 20th century, we come to the Modernist period. This was a time of great change, which emphasized the use of clean lines, minimalism, and simplicity in design. The Bauhaus school of design, which emerged in Germany in the 1920s, had a significant impact on landscape architecture during this period. Bauhaus architects and designers sought to create a new form of architecture that was functional, efficient, and inexpensive to build. This approach was reflected in the design of outdoor spaces, with landscape architects focusing on creating functional and efficient outdoor spaces. This movement also characterized by the use of new materials such as concrete, steel, and glass, and the use of large open spaces, which often had a geometric design. In the latter half of the 20th century, the field of landscape architecture began to shift towards a more human-centered approach, with an emphasis on creating outdoor spaces that were livable and accessible for all users. Landscape architects began to incorporate elements such as playgrounds, seating areas, and other amenities into their designs to make outdoor spaces more user-friendly. In the last decades, we have seen a renewed interest in sustainable design, and a focus on creating landscapes that are both beautiful and functional, while also being environmentally friendly. Landscape architects are now more concerned than ever with the environment, and they are working to create outdoor spaces that are sustainable, resilient, and adaptive to the changing climate. The concept of green infrastructure has emerged as a key aspect of sustainable landscape architecture. It is the use of natural elements such as vegetation, soils, and water to manage stormwater, reduce urban heat islands, and provide other environmental benefits. Landscape architects are increasingly incorporating green infrastructure into their designs, such as rain gardens, green roofs, and bioswales, to manage stormwater and improve the overall environmental performance of a site. Another aspect of sustainable landscape architecture is the use of native and adaptive plants. Landscape architects are now using native and adaptive plants that are well suited to the local climate and ecosystem, which are often more resilient to pests, disease, and changing weather patterns than non-native plants. Urban agriculture and community gardening have also become popular in recent years, as a way to increase access to fresh and healthy food, and to promote community cohesion and social interaction. In conclusion, landscape architecture has undergone significant changes throughout history, from ancient civilizations to modern day. Each period has been shaped by the cultural and political climate of the time, and has contributed to the development of the field as we know it today. From the formal gardens of the Renaissance, to the naturalistic designs of the picturesque movement, to the functional and sustainable designs of today, landscape architecture has evolved to meet the changing needs of society. It's an ever-evolving field that continues to adapt to the changing world. Thank you for watching our video on the evolution of landscape architecture, a historical perspective. We hope you found it informative and enjoyable. If you want to know more about the history of landscape architecture, feel free to check out our other videos on the subject.